Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I'm going live about now. This is probably my last stream before the It's Glowtime iPhone 16 Apple event on Monday, or the following Monday, I should say. I'll definitely be doing a live stream there. I actually shuffled work around for next week that way that I can do at least like 3, 4, maybe even 5 live streams throughout the week. Maybe I'll try to make finally some shorter content again, maybe in the form of a YouTube short or a regular video. We'll see. It probably depends on if there are any big surprises, like if something is truly shocking, it might be worth like a YouTube short where I just scream out loud. Maybe it's like like a cutout from my reaction video to the actual event. But we'll cross that bridge once we got there. Right now, we're having to deal, or we are enjoying dealing with last minute leaks when it comes to the upcoming Apple event. Everything from iPhone 16, 16 Pro families to other devices that are going to launch or not. That is, of course, a little bit of a teaser, given that we have talked about stuff like Apple Watches, AirPods, and iPad minis here on the channel in previous videos, speculating whether or not they will be part of the It's Glowtime Apple event. Apparently, there is now some confirmation about one of those devices not being there. I don't know if you make a big deal out of it or a small, one might say, a mini deal out of it, but that's about what you should expect. 9R joining in the chat. I haven't seen you in like months, I think. If Apple don't give us new iPad mini, I will cry for 963 days straight. Well, Apple probably ain't giving you an iPad mini, my brother. So that's spoiler alert, but you won't have to wait another 963 days, unless you mean that you have already been crying for 963 days. But my question is, why have you been crying since the very first day the iPad... what is it? The iPad Mini 6 would that be now, right? The A15 iPad Mini. Why were you crying since the very first day it came out? You should think about that, right? You should take what life gives you. You cannot be immediately disappointed. Otherwise, I fear like your crying will turn into a 1,800 day cry, right? It will be like something from the Bards, like an epic song where you just cry for years and years. Yeah, but that's about it for the intro. Before I actually fully start, I want to give a shout out to the YouTube. What do I call it? The YouTube jazz? Usually, man, I really haven't been doing as many videos as I should recently. It's a call out for YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Do it like 9R. Yeah, does, and comment live in the chat. I love me a lively live chat. I love agreeing with you guys. I love disagreeing with you guys. I love debating you a little. Ask me for emotional advice if you have a bad day or something like that. And of course, if you feel like supporting this channel directly, you can send a super chat or a super sticker right while I'm live here, or you can become a permanent supporter of this channel by going over to Patreon and subscribing over there, or you can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out go to Fizz, Angelica, and Max Maximus, who are MarTech Pro Max supporter right here on YouTube. But of course, anybody in the lower tiers is still very much appreciated, both on Patreon and here on YouTube. And of course, any small donation is appreciated if you can do it. Obviously, no stress if you cannot. I know a lot of people watching are younger, don't have that much disposable income, so do as you can. 9R saying your name is Anna Zaga. Okay, I think I've actually seen you comment under that name, like not under the actual video, but like not like in a live stream, but during when the video has already been uploaded. I think so, or maybe we contacted like on Twitter. Doesn't matter. Welcome to the stream, Anna. Are you a man or a woman? Or should I address you with some other pronoun of your choice? because I'm a little bit confused. I usually, I'll be honest. One thing where I absolutely excuse myself for being a sexist is by assuming that everybody commenting live in my live stream is a tech loving guy. I know that's not real. I know that I've even had some women watching and commenting, but that's just always my first assumption. I apologize. I know that shouldn't be the case. I know like 85% of my viewers are men or something like that, but usually the live viewers are like 95% men or something like that. And I think the 5% are my mom and my grandma. So yeah, excuse me for that. I'm a man and my name is Anna Zaga. Okay, you see, that's my sexism here with a thick G. I'll give you a thick G, my dude. I'll pronounce your name the way I choose to do it. But no, welcome to the stream. Hope you can become a regular chatter here. I love that. So let's start with this, after this very weird introduction to the video, I apologize, with the actual topics of the day. Now, there isn't that much here to analyze, because some of it is actually pretty straightforward. I think a lot of it will show itself in like reviews and like impressions, because, for example, the iPhone 16 Pro is getting some notable camera improvements. I know some people downplay it because they will say like, well, the iPhone 15 Pro kind of fixed a lot of HDR issues thanks to the image signal processor on the A17 Pro. So how much better do we really need to make the actual cameras? Well, when you think about it, the ultra-wide camera is actually not great by any means. And the main camera, while definitely very good, in terms of just physical size, is starting to fall behind a lot of Chinese competitors. Ironically, it's not falling behind Samsung or Google, like one might suspect, but it's falling behind the likes of Xiaomi, Oppo, and others who like have 1-inch sensors or very close to 1-inch sensors. And Apple is on a 1 by 1.28 inch sensor, so not too small by any means, but supposedly they are growing to a 1 by 1.14 inch sensor. Always the smaller the second number, the larger the actual sensor, so that would bring it much closer to a full 1-inch sensor size. And the ultra-wide camera is growing from a 12 megapixel sensor to a 48 megapixel sensor. That's also getting a slightly bit bigger. It would actually be very comparable in size to the new sensors, not the main sensor on the Pixel 9 Pro family. So that would be one area where Apple isn't behind anymore, but actually still has to catch up. Like with the main sensor, they're on one level or even slightly ahead of Google and Samsung. But like with many of the other sensors, they do have some catching up to do. Unfortunately, the zoom, the Tetra Prism camera system, the telephoto 5x camera, will not be improved, at least physically, this year. Maybe Apple will apply some new zoom algorithm, maybe some AI shenanigans, but it seems like, and the selfie camera is getting improved the following year. So if those two cameras are your priority, like selfie and telephoto, this is definitely not the year for you. If you're more a main sensor and ultra wide guy, which does appeal more to me, then this is the kind of the year for you. But let's actually look at what has been announced, at what is coming beyond those kind of physical changes to the cameras that we have already talked about plenty on this channel. This is basically everything kind of that we're covering today is coming from Mark Gurman. He does his usual like last weekend leading up to an event report. I think this is why he didn't post it on Sunday, because on Sunday some of it might have become irrelevant because, well, it's less than 24 hours until the event, depending on when he posts. So this is why he probably has given himself the entire weekend so people can actually read the rumors, analyze them, like what we are doing today, and then later look, oh, was he right? Was he not? Is he actually like Apple Jesus when it comes to rumors, or is he more like Apple Anatol car, like a fake Lord of Gifts giving you fake shit to analyze. That will be interesting. Now, let's see what he has actually said, because I'm kind of starting to ramble right now. Um, First and foremost, as the most interesting thing that kind of stuck out to me is the mention of 4K 120 FPS. Now, if you know, of course, the iPhone has slow motion recording at 120 and 240 FPS, but those are not at 4K. Those are at 1080p or 720p, so you definitely cannot expect too great quality over there. Now, what is interesting is that the way this is mentioned doesn't specifically say if this applies to like slow motion or just regular video recording, right? Because people are just saying that this will be like contrasted with the current 4K 60 capabilities, which are obviously not slow motion capabilities. That is regular video. Now, one thing that actually sticks out to me in a very interesting way is that if Apple can handle 4K 120 FPS video like in full quality capture, that means that at 60 FPS, the amount of dynamic range they should be able to provide, because obviously a lot of dynamic range in video comes from using different exposures for like different frames, and then obviously combining that through by having a lot of FPS. And what's interesting here is if Apple can give you good quality at 120 FPS, imagine what they can deliver at 60 FPS. This feature also seems to get even crazier if connected to external storage. So you would be able to capture ProRes 4K at 120 FPS. So obviously ProRes is a much higher quality encoder for video than H.264 or H.265, and this would make it much bigger. Like the file sizes would be huge for 4K at 120 FPS ProRes. Like even H.265 4K 120 will already be big, but now with ProRes, this is probably like, if this wasn't explicitly mentioned with external storage, I would wonder if this is exactly why a 2 terabyte model might exist this year. But yeah, apparently this seems a feature reserved for external storage capture, which is fascinating because a lot of people will probably, if they buy like a 1 terabyte iPhone, they'll probably have more storage on that iPhone than they will have on any other external drive that they might own, right? Like who owns like an SSD, for example, larger than 1 terabyte? That's like sure, people do, like if they work with a lot of large files and stuff like that, but would you really take then that SSD for iPhone video recording? That's just my kind of train of thought here, which is I wish that Apple wouldn't limit that, so that, for example, I have a 1 terabyte iPhone and I probably wouldn't buy an iPhone with less storage at this point. Like, give me that capability, even if that only means I can record for 10 minutes, at least give me the option. Now, I know that would come out with some degradation for the storage over time, because that's a lot of read and write, obviously, to put on the storage modules, but that should be a consumer choice, at least in my opinion. So a quick take is going from 1080p to 4K. Okay, depending how much you actually like that feature. Apparently, Apple has tested 8K video recording. Now, I have said time and time again, to me, 8K just makes absolutely no sense. If anything, if you really want 8K video, I think you should, like on a smartphone with a small sensor, I think you should capture 4K or maybe 1440p and then just do upscaling. Like there are AI programs and things like that. But like capturing 8K video would just come at like with a huge loss to the phone's capability to simultaneously handle good HDR, higher frame rates in general. So in my opinion, this is why a lot of phones that have 8K video recording do cap it at like 30 FPS. So let's see if Apple can manage to give you 8K at 60 with like an A18 Pro chip or something like that. but this was tested. It's not confirmed whether or not this feature will actually make it to like a production ready iPhone. Might come later in some kind of software update, but this is what we know for now. It doesn't surprise me, of course, that it would be tested, but it's just not something that I expect to become relevant anytime soon. Maybe Apple will consider giving you 8K once every camera on the back is actually 48 megapixels. So next year we are supposed to get a telephoto camera system with a 48 megapixel sensor, and maybe then Apple will say now 8K is good, because now every time you switch between those sensors during recording, all of them can give you 8K. We don't have to deal with any issues in terms of upscaling and things like that. But yeah, so I'm not a huge fan of 8K in general. Definitely not by capturing it with a below 1-inch sensor, because I believe that a lot of your computational capabilities at that point are much better invested in just maximizing all the detail you can get from every existing pixel on in a 4K video. But it is what it is. Whether or not Apple specifically might want that as an advertisement point, because let's be honest, the amount of features that they can advertise kind of is getting smaller and smaller as devices get more and more mature. That's, of course, another topic. Apple might introduce 8K, but fundamentally 4K 60, 4K 120 even might then become even like their preferred mode, like the default mode, and you might even have to go into like the settings app and to manually enable 8K and hope that it actually like gives you good quality, and maybe the camera would warn you, please only use that in great lighting conditions and things like that. So that's kind of how I see 8K. Like it would have to come with a lot of caveats so that people don't use the feature that might be worse in the end, right? They might click on 8K while 8K suddenly doesn't give you 60 FPS. The file size is absurdly large. Somehow the HDR looks worse than capturing 4K or 1080p video, and people are like, what the F is that? Is this? Why am I left with a worse video experience? Yeah, and then just people wouldn't use it, people would be angry, Apple would get a lot of negative feedback on that, and then other people online would regurgitate that, make it more intense than it actually is, and Apple has like another gate on their hands, like an 8K gate. Or even when like the iPhone XS originally launched, which I kind of consider like the first Apple device with like modern computational photography, and like in selfie cameras, it really smoothed out your face. It really was a very opinionated camera, where like that piss filter that people sometimes mention about Apple cameras, I would like, yes, Apple cameras probably have always been slightly warm, but like the XS and later the 11 is where I would say this kind of became intense before the 15 series fixed it a little bit actually. And with the XS, I have kind of like, this was like the early controversy that like your face would be very smoothed out, very like pink cheeks, like almost like you're wearing rouge, and this could be a similar situation. A Tipper Master asking, do you think more neural engine cores is jumping from 16 to 32? First jump since the 14 on core counts that would make it easily the fastest NPU by a far stretch. Well, you always have to consider, right? You cannot... If there are more cores, which I wouldn't even doubt that much, not because I've seen anything to suggest that, but more cores isn't always more better, because more cores, like every single core has like its own amount of cache, or even like tile memory when we talk about like GPU. It becomes increasingly more difficult to fully utilize each individual core if you give if you try to spread out the task artificially over more and more cores, right? Then also comes the question, well, are the new cores are actually like extra cores, right? Because if you make a core half the size and then you give twice the amount of cores and they don't clock as much as before, so they actually have fewer transistors for their logic, for like their compute, and they don't clock as high. And now there's also the question, how much cache do you can actually fit on a smaller core? Like now is the question, well, if I really optimize like the API, the actual use case, everything about it, yes, maybe spreading myself out over more cores that clock lower, so they are actually more efficient, right, is beneficial. And maybe I reduce cache amount per core by like 33%, right? That sounds like a lot, but when you consider that it's actually doubled, that you have doubled the cores, well, now you have 33% more cache, right? Because it's 66% of cache per core, but it's twice the number of cores. So I could see that happening. Tipo Master, I really want to encourage you, don't look at twice the core number potentially and think, oh, it would necessarily make it the fastest because it has more cores. I fully believe the A18 Pro will be the fastest in terms of neural engine, just because I've seen how much better the A17 Pro is versus even the latest Tensor G4 and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 in a lot of tasks. Now, you can argue if maybe the Snapdragon handles like int 8, like integer 8 tasks better than Apple. But everything that I've seen for like FP16, especially FP32, seems to be dramatically faster on the A17 Pro. And then on integer, it depends a little bit, like even which version of the latest like Geekbench AI test you look at. Like just yesterday, a new version came out and they explicitly said they readjusted some tests. So I cannot even tell you what the latest status is on what kind of like the best of the best, but I haven't seen anything that truly outclasses the A17 Pro. By outclassing, I would say something that is definitively like 20% better or more, because with something specific like a neural engine, 20% swings can happen pretty easily depending on how optimized the task is. With CPU, far less so. With GPU, less so. But then with the neural engine, yeah, actually pretty likely, because it's pretty new. A lot of tasks are still getting optimized. There might be some wild difference in like how bandwidth is utilized, things like that. So that's kind of my analysis. I would say it's difficult to say because Apple is like very much getting started with Apple Intelligence, and from everything I've seen, they are doing pretty good job with stuff like their text prediction stuff, and with the with like the cleanup feature in the Photos app. But that doesn't mean, of course, that more power wouldn't be good. But from everything I've seen, it already looks more impressive from an on-device perspective than what you would get from the competition. Obviously, the competition gives you more features. Like Google has like a huge slate of AI features, most of them, of course, running then through the cloud, and Samsung is licensing a lot of those features. But from the small amount of what Apple is providing already, I would say it kind of doesn't matter which chip is technically faster, because those devices will be running very different tasks. Okay, Tipo Master, you're not saying it will be 2x, but yeah, with the A17 Pro already being near or at the top, it should put it like far ahead, or at least like what I would argue is probably your best argument here to be made is like it will definitely like upstage like a potential Snapdragon 8 Gen 4, right? Because we can argue like how good will it be on N3E now that Apple doesn't have a Note advantage? How good will like be slightly refined Orion cores that are coming from the Snapdragon X Elite? How well will they perform in a lower power environment on mobile, right? Like on a smartphone. But yeah, with the neural engine, this is where I believe that Apple would be like, yeah, the A18 Pro, it might not be like the king of trillion operations per second, because everybody calculates this in some kind of weird way anyway. But when it comes to actual real life tasks, and you can actually do that, like when you go to the Google Photos app and you use some magic editor features, magic eraser features, I believe those run on device, then you will see how those features are actually faster on the A17 Pro than they are on Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, though it's kind of a wash there, because obviously it's like a Google feature, but then it's much faster than the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and even faster still than the 8 Gen 4, which is obviously embarrassing for Google because it's their app, it's their phone, it's their chip, and the best experience you can have with that app is by running it on an Apple smartphone on an Apple chip. So that's just something like there will be a lot of that in the future as we get more and more AI tasks, more and more stuff that is actually cross-platform, easier to compare, not just in ways like artificial benchmarks, but actual like real apps with AI integrated. Like I wouldn't be surprised, for example, if like Microsoft's Word, PowerPoint, Excel apps over time all get like access to powerful AI, with most of it probably running from the cloud, but some also getting to run on device. But let's see. I wish that this happens quicker so we can actually compare that. Because Tipomaster, I actually really share your enthusiasm. I know you always ask stuff about processors, neural engines, GPUs, whatever, and I really share your enthusiasm for analyzing those things. But yeah, we should be careful to not jump to conclusions before we actually know more. Yeah, and the last one when it comes to the actual like camera would be probably like the question about will Apple adopt JPEG XL, supposedly both for lossy and lossless photos. Would be interesting to see how that interacts with Apple's previous ProRes standard for capturing like kind of lossless photos. So that would be interesting. If there's any kind of hardware acceleration for that, will also be very interesting, because if there is no hardware acceleration for JPEG XL, I kind of would be surprised if it didn't come to older phones. Like judging from how like H.265 came to older phones once it was introduced in an iOS version, I kind of would hope that JPEG XL would also come that way. There are other features apparently, like removal of windows for videos. I wouldn't be surprised if that was like an exclusive feature. Apple could say that it's driven by AI, by a faster AI chip, and by a special microphone combination, right? So even if technically, of course, they could still backport that algorithm to an older phone, like especially a 15 Pro with the A17 Pro, I do believe that some of this stuff will be exclusive. Maybe not everything, but probably something. Multiple new photographic styles. I hope this actually makes photographic styles a lot more popular, because photographic styles are actually pretty great. A lot of people, as I mentioned before, don't like the warm hue of photos that are captured with Apple's regular camera. And what they forget is that they can very quickly just configure themselves a photographic style that is like 10-15% cooler. It doesn't impact dynamic range at all. It doesn't impact detail at all. You just have to make sure that that's the mode that's active for you. And now you use it, and now you don't get a quote unquote piss filter on your photos. So that's always surprised me, especially from like pro reviewers who know about these features, how they always fail to mention that photographic styles in the Apple Camera app are not filters in any way. They actually change the basic foundation of the algorithm. Well, not the most basic, but like at least the color tone and like the exposure level. And I just think it's weird how more people are not praising that. I personally have never found the need for that, because I capture a lot of ProRes images which are not compatible with photographic styles, but they're also not as prone to the warm hue of regular JPEGs or HIVC. What is it? HEIVC? HIVC? HEVC? I'll look that up later on. It's high quality image. I'll look it up later. Or somebody let me know in the comments how much smarter you are at utilizing your brain right away. And supposedly, these new photographic styles will have better machine learning to preserve skin tones and a new mode for capturing spatial videos and can be viewed in 3D on Apple Vision Pro. As somebody who has gotten to actually experience that on Apple Vision Pro, I haven't bought one for myself because, quite honestly, VR is exhausting to me. I've kind of stopped using my PSVR 2, not because of a lack of games, but I just get headaches. I probably need glasses in general, and yeah, but it's a very, very impressive experience if you can get it. If like your Apple Store recently got Apple Vision Pro because it came to your region, I highly, highly recommend you actually check it out. Next is a feature that has nothing to do with the actual cameras, but it definitely impacts like the camera app, and that is how you will actually be capturing images. In fact, you will now be doing so through the help of an additional button, because after redesigning the mute button into the mute switch into the action button, Apple is giving us yet another new button. This one not a replacement for a previous button, but actually a real new button. Well, real is questionable because it is going to be haptics based rather than actually like taptically, like you cannot actually press it down for real, but you know what I mean at this point. It's a dedicated camera button, which I know some people, when we started getting initial rumors about the capture button, have talked about like, well, we don't technically know what the capture button does. And I'm like, really? Like, like, look, I know that some of you have like sources that come from the manufacturing process rather than actual like engineering, or like whether it's software or hardware, right? Or certainly not like higher Apple execs, but you can like probably ascertain pretty well what the capture button is supposed to do. Of course, over time, we got rumors about how you will be able to focus with it by holding it for longer, by pressing it. And it will feel that, and then by clicking, by forcefully pressing onto it, how you'll be able to zoom in and out by like swiping up and down on it. And yeah, that will be very interesting, but there are some new details here. They're not game-changing. There will be, supposedly the camera button will be compatible with third-party camera apps. That to me is not surprising for one specific thing, and that is the higher amount of scrutiny for Apple coming from government regulators, new laws, things like that. I think Apple can show a lot of goodwill by introducing a new hardware feature and by saying immediately, well, like in a month, we are like the latest version of iOS in a month, let's say like iOS 18.1 will come with a dedicated API so that your apps can actually be opened through the camera, through the capture button, but especially that it can be controlled through the capture button. So your image capturing experience is actually the same across our regular app and third-party apps. Of course, Apple has done a lot in recent years to make third-party apps more powerful on a similar level to their own apps, but I think it would be a great sign from them and a very smart move, given the amount of scrutiny they get from regulators, to just make it like almost instantly compatible, or just instantly for that matter. But everything else that we've heard about, it still stands. It's a touch-sensitive button capable of reproducing different action depending on how you price or slide on it. With a soft press, the camera button will trigger autofocus. A hard press will take the photo or start shooting video. Sliding your finger across the surface or button will adjust zoom or exposure. That's actually interesting. I wonder if there will be like a button way to control it, like maybe like a double tap will switch you between controlling zoom and exposure, or if that is something that you would have to choose in settings, or maybe right in the camera app on the screen as you're capturing. Apple is kind of known to hide a few too many camera features in the settings app, where in my opinion they should put them just up front. even at the risk of slightly over cluttering the camera app. But yeah, Apple is a little weird in that regard sometimes. They just prefer their apps to look cleaner, to not clutter up too much, things like that. And with that, that kind of finishes the camera saga. Everything else that we've talked about kind of stands with the kind of cameras we get, the improvements to hardware. We don't know exactly if the A18 Pro is like designed for some kind of game-changing HDR capabilities. We don't know if Apple will make it standard to shoot 48 megapixels the way they made 24 megapixel capture standard last year in a surprise move with the 15 and 15 Pro. Obviously, you can manually switch to 48 megapixels, but it still is slower than the 24 megapixel mode, and it does have slightly worse HDR. So maybe that will be a change, and Apple will advertise even higher resolution capture. But I wouldn't bet on that. But you kind of get what I'm getting at, right? Which is that there is still stuff that Apple could announce that we didn't expect, or stuff that might just stick out more than what could expect from the rumors, right? Like the individual features that we've mentioned very briefly here, right? Like new photographic styles, better preserved skin tones. Like if you, for example, follow Dame Tech, who does like great processor reviews for smartphones on YouTube, he does have a Twitter account, and he does give you like photo comparisons there. And one thing that really stuck out to me is how the 15 Pro was much better at preserving his skin tone, who like he's a black person on a very basic level, than the Pixel 9 Pro, which the Pixel 9 Pro supposedly was always better for that. But now Apple kind of caught up and apparently overtook them, even with now Google offering you like a 1 year newer phone. So you can imagine what that will do if Apple further improves on their cameras while the competition is already behind their last year's flagship. So that would be, of course, I'm somebody who I like seeing, like, for a few minutes, like Apple really win and trounce the competition. It obviously gives me a good feeling when I buy one of their products, knowing it's kind of the best in the industry. But obviously, that's not really something I wish to happen in perpetuity, right? Like, I want others to at least slightly catch up to Apple's processors, Apple's image processing, things like that, so that the idea of getting a competitive device is not as ridiculous to some people in the West, because many people in the West have grown accustomed to, oh, I buy an iPhone and then I upgrade to another iPhone, or I buy a Samsung and then I upgrade to another Samsung. And maybe if like I really want something cheaper, I'll consider a Chinese device, or if I want like something, I guess, more authentically Androidy, then I'll get myself a Pixel. But even that is like a niche of a niche. And it would, of course, be fun to see Apple also get like trounced on certain stuff. Like, for example, when it comes to zoom features, for years, a lot of other competitors had dramatically better zoom than Apple. And in a way, some like Chinese competitors that pair their like 3 or 5x telephotos with huge sensors comparatively to Apple's, which like Apple's is like 1/3, and they have like 1/2, or even like 1/1.8 or something like that inch sensors for their zoom cameras. But then the main camera, even if it's has a larger sensor, doesn't really give you the same like good experience that Apple does. And I do want more competition. I know that's not usually something you hear a lot from like fanboys, which I guess I'm kind of associated as, but I do want like in 1 year for Apple to just come out with a great processor, really fast, really efficient, but then like Qualcomm comes out like 2 months later basically saying, well, in 2 months we're going to launch smartphones that are like legitimately 20% faster across CPU and GPU, and guess what, they consume about the same amount of power. Like that would be a really, really cool thing to see, knowing Apple would now have to try harder next year, or Apple would try to have to find other ways to deliver value to their consumers, maybe giving you more RAM the next year, more storage per gigabyte. So that's kind of what I want to see. I want to see a competitive landscape. You can, of course, let me know if you agree with that, if you disagree with that, if you just want Apple to steamroll everything else and then hope that somehow they still keep their prices in check. But that's kind of my outlook. And with that, we actually finished the first topic, and we're a little over half an hour into the stream. I just want to recommend you guys to please do all the YouTube jazz for me. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it, and be super lively in the chat. I love it when we interact with each other, share ideas back and forth. You ask questions, I give answers. Sometimes I ask questions. And of course, if you want to support this channel directly, leave a super chat or a super sticker, or consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube, or a supporter over on Patreon. Next is actually, I actually talked about how Apple could give you more value. Well, this is one where technically Apple doesn't give you lower value, but they also don't really give you more. So it's a little bit contradictory, but it's actually pretty easy to understand. And that is, this is very new. I believe it's coming from like TrendForce, right? Which they can be hit or miss, but usually when a rumor is coming out that close to an event, I kind of tend to believe it. And that is regarding the iPhone 16 Pro pricing. Now, this is not about the iPhone 16 Pro family, so it's not about the smaller 16 Pro and the Pro Max. No, this is literally just about the smaller 16 Pro. And the rumor goes as following, is that the base model of the 16 Pro would go up from 128 gigabytes of storage to 256. And with that increase, it would also increase its base price from $999 to $1,099, which, if of course you look at the current pricing of the iPhone 15 Pro, you'll find that $1,099 is the exact price of the current 256 gigabyte configuration. This is pretty much the exact move that Apple pulled with the 15 Pro Max last year, where they basically discontinued 128 gigabytes, which previously cost $1099, and then only gave you the $1199 model, but with the same amount of storage as before. So they didn't give you less value or less storage for the price or whatever. But it's definitely, if you are somebody who really doesn't care for a lot of storage and all you care is just getting the best iPhone at the cheapest possible price, you are now taking away the option to buy 128 gigabytes for $100 less. Now, what it means for the broader like storage lineup is actually difficult to say. Now, while that to me suggests, of course, that we'll get a 16 Pro at $1,099 with 256 gigabytes, and then the 16 Pro Max at $1,199 for 256 gigabytes, which would be the same price as for the 15 Pro Max. There's also the question of if Apple would offer you a 2 terabyte version, which the current lineup for the Pro Max, which would kind of be mirrored this way for this year for the 16 Pro, according to this rumor, goes 256, 512, and 1 terabyte. And the question is, if Apple introduces 2 terabytes, would they still keep, for example, the 512 gigabyte version in there? Because to me, the upgrade cost between 256 and 1 terabyte is ridiculous, because you pay $200 to go to 512, and then you pay another $200 to go to 1 terabyte. And while those prices are very much similar to what you get on the Mac, you can get up to PCIe 4.0 storage for that price. So while it's still overly expensive, that storage is like 3-4 times faster than what you get on the iPhone in many ways. So the actual like cost for Apple to integrate that storage is even more ridiculously low than it is already on the Mac. So to me, I would hope that if Apple introduces a 2 terabyte version, that they would cut down on the upgrade cost to a 1 terabyte, maybe at least by $100, right? So from 256 it would be like $300 to get 1 terabytes, and then $400 to get 2 terabytes, because whoever wants 2 terabytes probably has the money to spend on it if they really want to. So if Apple wants to make their crazy margins that way, they can do it. But this idea of paying $400 for 768 gigs of storage is just ridiculous to me. So I just would very much hope that it gets slightly better. We are already not getting more RAM this year. We're getting likely faster RAM, but that's not dramatically more expensive for Apple, of course, to source. And I would hope that we get a slightly better deal on storage, which of course would become even more important in countries outside the United States, because the dollar prices kind of have always been okay, in my opinion. Even some of the ridiculous storage upgrade prices, because the base price is not too crazy, if that makes sense for you. But in other countries where not only is the base price often much higher with currency conversion, different taxes, import tariffs sometimes, but then also like you also get like the same upcharge per storage upgrade, right? So, for example, where it costs $200 to upgrade to certain storage configuration, here in Europe it would be like 280. So that, of course, is very, very bad. Or would it be? I'll actually look up. Would it be 240? Apple.com/de. Usually I try to avoid the German website, but today, so let's look at the MacBook Air. And if we are gonna upgrade it in terms of storage, how much does it cost us? Well, here you also get the upgrade. So this is how you get, well, 230. That's not as crazy as it used to be. Did Apple adjust the upgrade for that? Because 230 euros, considering the integrated taxes here and the fact that you also get the fully enabled M3 chip, well, this is actually a better deal than I remember it being. So, okay, I'll actually take some criticism back. That kind of difference, I'll like, look, don't get me wrong, $200 for 256 gigabytes of more storage is outrageous in many ways, but at least on the MacBook Air you also get a faster charger with 2 ports on here. You also get the fully enabled M3 chip, and you get 512 gigs of storage. So the deal here is actually much better than on the iPhone, which if you look on the 15 Pro, and let's actually look at the base model, so the smaller one, you already see, of course, the starting price at 11.99 euros is much higher than one might think if it costs $9.99 in dollars. So let's say we want titanium blue, so it's $130, 130 euros to give you more, to give you 128 gigabyte more storage, and then it's 250 euros on top of that to go from 256 to 512, and you don't get any of. So this upgrade is more expensive than the upgrade we just saw for the MacBook Air, and it doesn't have some of the niceties of the upgrade of the MacBook Air, which of course is like the better charger and the faster chip. So yeah, Apple really likes to get their margins from higher storage, especially as they hit like storage configurations where like more people are inclined to pay more, where the people buying them are inclined to pay more, because if you are buying something so premium, $30-$40 more probably doesn't stick out as much as if you are looking down there, right? So that's kind of how I see it. This is why, of course, This would probably mean that the new iPhone starts now at this price here in Germany. Maybe Apple would be smart enough to just cut it down a little bit to like 12.99 for 256 gigabytes. But given how the euro currency has been developing and stuff like that, I wouldn't really put too much trust on that. So yeah, that's kind of my analysis on iPhones getting more storage for technically the same amount of money. Yeah, so there isn't too much, I would say, analysis needed for that, simply because we have seen pretty much that exact same pricing change on the 15 Pro Max last year, and now it makes sense for Apple to do the same on the 16 Pro. So that's kind of it for the iPhone in terms of like, I would say, like game changing stuff. The last thing that I think a lot of people care about when it comes to the iPhone is how does it look? Now, I don't think it actually dramatically changes if people are likely to buy it or not. Of course, there will still be new stuff in terms of looks this year too, because the iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max are rumored to get even thinner bezels than before. But when it comes to the back, what some people call like the stove top like arrangement of cameras supposedly is still the same. Like it's rumored that the iPhone 17 Slim would like rearrange cameras on the back. But yeah, definitely not happening on the 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max this year. We of course know that the regular 16 would get like just a 2-camera layout where the cameras are horizontally next to each other or vertically, depending on how you look at it. Like they aren't diagonally arranged anymore, and that would be part of how the regular iPhone 16 gets the capability to record spatial video. At least that's the rumor. Of course, Apple hasn't officially confirmed that what prevents like the regular 15 from capturing spatial video, except for the A17 chip, because the regular iPhone 15 has the A16. Could be like the different camera arrangements on the back. Sorry, I'll just have to drink a little bit. It's so freaking hot the last couple of days. It's just your throat dries out completely over the day, especially when you talk to like patients and stuff. Yeah. So one thing, of course, that we have been talking about is the color of the iPhone 16 Pro, the new like gold or desert titanium, however it might actually be called. Some people now do say that it is going to be gold, which kind of makes sense because Apple has a history with gold, and a lot of like rumors, mock-ups, and especially like dummies, which of course some people for some reason don't understand that the color on dummy models does not properly reflect the way Apple is coloring their iPhones, which to me is like insane. Like some people have looked at this image and have believed ever since that this is the exact like bronze gold desert color that will come to the 15 Pro, to the 16 Pro family. But apparently it is much more impressive than this kind of like poopish brown, as some people have called it. Is that it is pretty bronze-like, and it looks very impressive and not terribly like the early renders. So if you were looking at a lot of things that made it look very brown, it's definitely not happening that way. When it comes to the regular models, this is actually very surprising to me because it only mentions actual like colors. Like usually we would include like white and black, or like silver and whatever midnight. But right now, Mark Gurman, according to this, is saying there will be yellow that replaces white, and then new shades of green, pink, and blue. Which, of course, if you actually look at Apple's current lineup for the regular iPhone 15, that has been criticized for the colors being very muted and very subtle. And obviously, they look even more subtle than they do here. So I think I'll have to click on buy. and then it gives me the color options. So let's get with the plus one, right? So the yellow one, which again in real life looks much more white than it does here, would just replace the white. Supposedly there wouldn't be any black version, which is insane, and then the rest would be what does Mark Gurman say here? Uh, uh, Suggesting that green, pink, and blue. So green, blue, if you can call that blue, and pink. So that to me is quite crazy that we wouldn't get the option for people who just like matte black, like your MKBHDs. That they wouldn't be able to just buy a phone like that anymore. It's absolutely unexplainable to me because it's not like there's any like crazy price difference to consider in the production here, unless Apple just wants to push all like lovers of black and like simple like silver white to move to the Pro models. It's a very surprising move to have only 4 colors, but supposedly these colors are less muted. And when you actually think about it in the past, we have actually covered a rumor here about the iPhone's colors, which again, pink, green, and blue. Now we can argue if that is white or if that is yellow, and just completely like you cannot tell that because it's the same coloring method as in the previous generation, which of course would clash with the coloring scheme of the models that are shown here. But then we clearly had a black model. So what happened to that? Is Mark Gurman maybe wrong? Was this completely wrong? I couldn't tell you, but I am covering this because I am honestly pretty confused by the absence of just a regular black, regular iPhone, and even the absence of just a regular white one. Because, like, the idea that Apple believes that it wouldn't potentially scare people away, like having a yellow and blue and green and pink without white. Like if you wanted like the most neutral color, you would probably have to pick yellow in the hope that it's not that colorful to be distracting. That to me is very confusing. I wonder if maybe Mark Gurman just got access to the colorful ones, and the regular white and black might have just escaped him, or maybe even just the black. But eliminating both is just, yeah, it's pretty crazy to me. Like blue, pink, because you see how like with these colors, not having white is not bad because you can get blue or even yellow, and those will just look either like a very cold white or like a warm white. Like this looks more like eggshell color in real life. You won't notice it too much. But if you really want a very neutral tone, you'll just get black. The idea that that black now goes away and the colors are now supposedly much more saturated, so they don't actually look like white anymore, that to me is just a crazy combination of choices. But we'll see. We'll see how that ultimately plays out. And what I would actually be very interested in, what kind of like color then becomes the favorite, because I would probably bet on the black right now being the most popular and very much likely followed by blue, and maybe then pink if like a lot of women want to buy it. Maybe yellow and green are somewhat comparable but less popular. That would be about where I would put it. If you eliminate black, that fully, and you make all those colors that much more saturated, that fully throws me for a loop. I just couldn't predict what actually rises to the top at that point. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the 16 and 16 Pro iPhones. Again, everything from aesthetics to cameras. Of course, we will cover a lot more once those devices are actually out and we have like performance for the A18 Pro, battery life, cooling, how bright the displays get, how good the capture button actually feels in real life, all those things. But yeah, there weren't any last minute leaks for any of that. But I think pricing, looks, and camera kind of already are important enough for me to make this video. At least I hope so. And now we come to a device that is definitely less exciting this year, I think, for most people. I'm definitely not upgrading my Apple Watch Ultra 2 this year. And that is that the Apple Watch Series 10, and I would be surprised if the Ultra 3 didn't get the same feature, is supposedly getting sleep apnea detection this year. This is also coming from Mark Gurman, so thank you, Mark Gurman, and curse be upon you if all of this is false and I'm just wasting my and your time on this. But this is supposedly like the major standout feature for the Series 10. Obviously, we have had rumors about it having also a newer processor and things like that, but I doubt that most people buying Apple Watches really care that much about it. There is the focus on the redesigned thinner chassis and larger display, with the, of course, the smallest screen size now being with on the 45 millimeter Apple Watch, and then also getting the option to buy 49 millimeter Apple Watch Series 10, which would kind of match the Apple Watch Ultra, which has obviously always been 49 millimeters. Yeah, we have known, of course, that Apple has been working on features like sleep apnea detection for years. They've also worked with on stuff like blood pressure. Supposedly, that is still some time off. They've also talked about, that rumors have talked about Apple working on like blood sugar level detections for like diabetics and stuff like that. That's supposedly even longer away than like blood pressure detection. But supposedly sleep apnea would be coming to both the Apple Watch Series 10 and Ultra 3. The watch would be able to detect whether a user has sleep apnea and then recommend them consult with a doctor for more assistance. That would add to features like irregular heart rate detection, low heart rate detection, blood oxygen level, other health conditions. And of course, all of that would be working like basically in synergy. Gurman says that while Apple is set to announce the feature on Monday, it might not actually be available immediately. We've obviously had stuff like that in the past. For example, the iPhone 17 Plus, iPhone 7 Plus, not 17 Plus, was introduced with the portrait mode being demoed, but then the portrait mode took some time later to come to the actual iPhone. So I'm not too surprised that something like that might happen. Although new hardware is required, the enabling of the functionality would come as part of a future WatchOS software update, suggesting Apple is doing last-minute work on the feature. I don't know if that means they might also still be waiting for some kind of like government approval for that feature, or if they will treat it the way they featured like blood oxygen level stuff. Where they treat it more as like a health and fitness feature rather than like a feature that they can go like to the regulatory bodies and get like real government approval, because obviously that takes quite a lot of time. Maybe that could be the holdup here, but at least we don't know here for now. The sleep apnea feature is likely related to the new Vitals app in WatchOS 11. You can still create a Vitals app without sleep apnea, which tracks a variety of blood health metrics while the user sleeps. Sure, that's one way to put it. But yeah, sleep apnea detection definitely would be the first feature when it comes to like that works during your sleep, except for stuff like that also works beyond your sleep, like irregular heart rhythm, right? That's the first feature where I would really say like, oh yeah, maybe that actually makes sense to wear your Apple Watch during sleep, because I know a lot of people like hyperfixate on like sleep quality, like if they reach like REM sleep or whatever. And I just tell people, look, if you aren't tired throughout the day, you're probably getting enough sleep. And even if you aren't getting good sleep, then getting more data on it from your watch, unless you have something like sleep apnea, like, is probably not very relevant. You should just work on your sleep hygiene, which involves like how cool the room is that you sleep in, how much light you have in that room, how long before sleep have you still used technology with like a very like warm display and stuff like that. So that is for you to consider. But like this idea that there are like these Patrick Bates type people who are like, I mid max my sleep, I'll get 100% on my sleep every day from like my sleep app, and I'm like, bro, do you actually like? Are you happy? Are you tired or not during the day? Because who effing cares about like what like number like an app gives you, as long as you're actually functioning and functioning well. If you're not functioning well and the app still gives you 100%, it gives you it can give you a false sense of safety, like, oh, everything is all right, my sleep is good, so if I'm tired it's probably just stress or something. No, no, no. A lot of like smartwatches, things like that, they just don't have all the data that like you would get in a proper like sleep laboratory where you just get like your temperature measured really correctly from the core, where your oxygen level is like measured the way it's supposed to, with like properly certified devices, like where you're isolated from other sounds and stuff. I've already raged about stuff like sleep tracking stats, but yeah, this would definitely be something that I actually do recommend people on tracking, and would actually encourage maybe even people like me on potentially wearing an Apple Watch at night. So if I ever, God forbid, develop sleep apnea, my Apple Watch actually knows it and might recommend me I do something about it. But yeah, that's the standout feature for this year's Apple Watch. I'm more interested to see how like the larger screen size will impact pricing and like consumer response. But to me in general, this year's Apple Watch is not that exciting because I still have last year's Apple Watch Ultra 2 and I'm pretty happy with it. Last and unfortunately very much least in terms of happiness is the idea, and this goes up to you, Anna Zaga, is we have talked about in the past about whether or not an iPad mini would make a way to its Glowtime event. Mark Gurman is now coming out and saying that the iPad mini is coming out, but in October. So don't cry too many tears. Maybe just cry for another month, and then we're getting a new iPad mini. Now, we have not talked about too much about like what an iPad mini would have as a meaningful change, except for a potential A17 or A18 chip inside it. If it's launching a month after the iPhone 16, I'm very much inclined to believe that it would just have the A18 chip. And therefore would also have 8 gigs of memory, and it would also get 128 gigabytes of base storage, and hopefully keep the same base pricing as the current generation. That way it doesn't clash too much with the iPad Air, which obviously has the M2 chip, which technically would have like a lot more oomph in some ways, but would also consume a lot more power. And obviously, if we talk about chips like M3 or M4, those chips would be way too expensive to integrate with an iPad mini. So, and also still consume too much power and be too much of a drag on battery life. So in my opinion, it's most likely that the iPad mini gets like an A18 chip, maybe like does the repositioning of the screen that has been rumored for quite a while. So so the screen tearing, if you want to call it that, the jelly scrolling effect, it's mostly eliminating it, but it would still be like a 60 hertz LCD panel, nothing OLED, nothing ProMotion, at least not before we hit like 2026. That's supposedly when like smaller, cheaper iPads and like the Pro models will get OLED as well. Now that OLED is very likely not to be tandem OLED, but tandem OLED is kind of the best OLED. So if we can get still decent OLED that's somewhat cheaper, so the devices can be a little cheaper, but it's still like might have like better burn-in resistance and better longevity than a lot of current regular quote unquote OLED, that's of course very welcome. Anna Zaga, you're back for the perfect time. Yeah, as I said, wait for October for the iPad mini. Of course, an A18 chip would be exciting in general, but it wouldn't be too much of a game changer. That being said, I know a lot of people just like the iPad mini for how small and compact it is. So if you don't need like OLED or anything crazy from it, I think a lot of people will be happy. Exactly. Just cry for another month. Yeah, so in that October event would happen alongside with M4 Macs, like 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, and iMac. But I know some people have asked for like the M4 to come to the iPad mini. I can very much promise you that that is not happening. There's, of course, smaller features that it still should be getting that recently came to the new iPad Air, like faster Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capabilities. But of course, again, none of that is super game-changing. But it would be quite an upgrade over today's A15-based iPad mini. Yeah, that's about it for today. I did want to make this a slightly brief video. I might try to stream like on Sunday, but if there is anything like last minute still coming out about its Glowtime event, but I've really taken an effort to free up some time next week so I can actually do a lot of coverage next week. So leave a super chat for that if you really appreciate that. No, just kidding. I enjoy doing this, so it's not about money in any way. But yeah, this is why I'm not sure if I'll take the time like on the weekend to stream, because I do have some plans with friends and I don't quite know when those will be when those will end. So yeah, but that's about it. We've covered everything from like the latest on iPhone 16, from pricing, colors, camera capabilities, capture button behavior. We've covered what might be the standout feature for this year's Apple Watch and how it might actually come out a little bit after the Apple Watch itself, and how you should expect an iPad mini to still come this year, but maybe don't expect it to come in September alongside the iPhone. Anna, you're saying, I think I will go with iPad mini and big Android tablet with OLED display and use this combo for 5 to 7 years with my Galaxy S24 Ultra. That's a very interesting setup. I usually don't hear about people combining like iOS smartphones, Android smartphones with iPad minis. Usually when I hear about people getting iPads even alongside Android phones, that isn't that uncommon, because like they also like give their kids a lot of access, but it's usually more like either the cheapest iPad or like an iPad Air. People who have like iPad Pros, I usually see like having also just iPhones in general, because once you probably are buying the iPad Pro, money is not enough of an issue for you to consider any smartphone beyond an iPhone, and you probably are a really big fan of like the ecosystem thing. But 9R or Anna, if you actually do this, please at some point let me know how it actually is, like constantly moving from 120 hertz OLED displays to a 60 hertz LCD on the iPad mini. Because to me, a very big reason why I upgraded a lot of my devices over a quick period of time was because yeah, your ecosystem is a little weird. Why I upgraded is because like a lot of my devices is because I wanted ProMotion. right? So 2 years ago, the iPhone 13 Pro Max got promotion. This is when I upgraded my 10s to a 13 Pro Max. The 14-inch MacBook Pro came out with promotion, and I got the one with the M1 Max chip, and that's when I upgraded my, at that point, 9-year-old iMac. And my iPad, I actually upgraded my late 2015 iPad Pro with the A9X chip to the M1 12.9-inch iPad Pro because that one had promotion. So every screen I have, it's not just 120 hertz promotion, but it's also HDR capable, at least in some way. Of course, my iPhone now is the 15 Pro Max, so I've upgraded even from that. But yeah, it just would feel weird to me, but I know a lot of people do that. For example, like Dave from iCave Dave, like he loves iPad mini, and he doesn't genuinely care about like 60 hertz or not. You're using an Android phone with an Apple laptop. I think that's actually not too uncommon. Probably depends a little bit on your work. Like I've seen a lot of people try to make an Apple laptop work with Android phones just because of the better battery life and things like that. Like one of my best friends has like a Galaxy S23 Plus or 22, I'm not quite sure, and I think it's an S22 Plus, and a MacBook Pro 13-inch, but that was even like before Apple Silicon. So yeah, that combo is actually not as uncommon as what else you described. And your current tablet is an iPad Pro from 2018. To be honest, if you have an Apple laptop and you already have an iPad Pro, I have a hard time recommending to you getting an OLED Android tablet, because the issue with those tablets is like Android in of itself is not that great designed for tablets. And if you really wanted just one device, right, I would probably recommend you an Android tablet, because you can obviously do some stuff more on it, like especially when it comes to site loading, that you cannot do with an iPad. But if you're willing to buy an iPad mini and an Android tablet with an OLED display, which that's where they get a little bit more expensive, wouldn't it be better for you to get like an M4 11-inch iPad Pro? Because those are they are below 1 pound in weight. So while you cannot one-hand them, like one-hand use them like an iPad mini, they're still compact. They will give you the best OLED display on the market. You will have a nice continuity from your 2018 iPad Pro, because the interface will be familiar, the apps will transfer over. That's at least how I would think of that. But of course, I'm not like ordering you to do any of that. When I changed from iPhone 11 Pro Max to Galaxy S24 Ultra, I don't feel the power of 120 hertz. But in iPad, I see this different a lot. I've actually heard that from people who say that they feel 120 hertz better on larger screens than on smaller ones. It does actually make sense to a degree, but also on the iPhone, I would argue that OLED does refresh very fast. So there's probably not too much of a difference between 60 and 120 hertz. Like there is, of course, a difference, but it might not be, like, depending on your eyes, might not be that perceivable. But if you had like a previously like slow 60 hertz LCD to now a decently smooth 126, because Apple's mini LED screens do not have very fast response times, because not only is it like a not super fast LCD and not like a very quick like a TFT panel or something like that, but the algorithm of making it all work together with all those 2,000 plus zones of backlighting, it just slows everything down. But yeah, I can see what you mean. And yeah, iOS does in general feel smoother too in many ways. You brought a MacBook Air M2, but sadly I don't like laptop system ever. I know it's better, but I don't know how to use it in my own ideas. Well, yeah, this is the issue, right? Because a lot of people, like, to me, I own my M1 Max MacBook Pro. I like it a lot, but in general, like, for example, I have it with like 1 terabyte, and I've filled up about 300 gigabytes. And I sometimes ask myself, should I have gotten like 2 terabytes here? And the answer very much is no, because yes, I could artificially fill it up with like 500 old games for like old emulators and stuff like that. I could like decide to keep all my iCloud stuff forever offline stored on it. But I still have my 256 gigabyte iPad Pro and things like that. And I enjoy using it more in many ways because I can just pick it up more. I can move around with it easier. It has the Apple Pencil, which opens up some other use cases. So that, of course, to me just means, well, my Mac is a more powerful iPad in many ways without the touchscreen, but I wouldn't even want a touchscreen with that kind of device format, but form factor. But the other thing is that like, I just like the simplicity of iPad and iPad OS itself. I know a lot of people will be like, well, Mac OS might be lacking behind Windows in like gaming. But I'm like, yeah, but if I want to game a lot, I probably will do it on my PlayStation anyway, or like a gaming PC. On a laptop, I don't know if I even want it that much. And if I move to an iPad, it doesn't even have that much power at that point. So I probably would just want to run mobile games in general for the battery life, for the better performance, things like that, for the simplicity, for not filling up too much of the storage and RAM. So with my Mac, I kind of only end up using it hardcore for when I really need to type a lot. But again, I do have actually like a good keyboard to connect to my iPad, and for streaming, because that setup doesn't work on the iPad, and I actually use my iPad simultaneously to like read the chat and check if my video is working, if the stream is working. So to me, I actually understand what you mean. Like, I do like appreciate what I have in my M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro, but it's not my favorite Apple device I own. It's probably not even in the top 3. I use iPad for editing, and my reason to buy MacBook to make my editing more professional, but you don't do anything. Yeah, that's also the question. If like, if this is partially what people don't understand, this happened a lot with photo editing like 10 years ago, when people understood that like once you hit like quad core, and on mobile, even like dual core or whatever, especially once you add efficiency cores to the mix, and you like hit like 3 gigahertz, 3.5, and like you have like it, like you probably don't even need that much GPU, but like let's say you have the power of a 1060, you have more than enough power to edit photos and stuff like that. And people have like still pushed for like, oh, I need more power for photo editing. And like, no, not really. Like, yeah, some stuff will be smoother in Lightroom or whatever. And maybe if you do like bulk photo editing, like if you're a wedding photographer and you're applying a lot of effects to like 50 or 100 images simultaneously, maybe. But if you're just doing it for yourself or just doing it for like YouTube thumbnails, you're fine with pretty much ancient hardware at that point. Even the same goes for like basic streaming or even like 1080p video editing, especially if you don't work like with a lot of hardcore color correction or stuff like that. You're fine. And this is why I try not to tell people what device they should buy. I just also try to tell them, look, my favorite device in so many ways is the iPad, because it can do so many of the things I expect from my laptop or even my desktop. I don't have a desktop at this point, but it does it in such a more fun way. and it has more than enough performance for a lot of the things that I mentioned. Unfortunately, software limitations would prevent me from using it for like streaming, at least the way I currently do streaming. And that's definitely a criticism towards Apple, but that's also something that I myself must know, right? Nobody forced me to buy an iPad. I could just own my MacBook and maybe like an iPad mini alongside it. But I still wanted to get the nicer Pro iPad with mini LED, M1 chips, things like that. 9R, I use iPad since 2010 and 7 years old. Oh my God, you're so freaking young. This things makes the iPad so easy for me. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people who are now growing up with iPads are actually very much accustomed to iPad OS. They like the paradigm of using their fingers for multi-touch and multitasking, things like that. They might even get slightly confused by some of the user interface of like it, especially once you get into like Linux desktop or whatever, but even something like Mac OS. But yeah, so I fully understand you. But this is where about I need to wrap up. We are almost 1.5 hours into the stream. I want to thank everyone who joined. I want to once again encourage you guys to do all the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Yeah, you're 20, but I'm almost 28, so you're a baby to me. Yeah, so like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment on the video what since actually been uploaded, because that's what you live stream viewers don't actually do enough. It would help a lot with the algorithm if you could leave just a regular comment. Whenever you catch me live in the future, please consider leaving a super chat or a super sticker as a small donation. But if you want to support this channel directly in the long term, you can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Fizz, Angelica, and Max Maximus, or MarkTech Max supporter right here on YouTube. And you can also become a supporter over on Patreon. Shout out goes to Louis Gott, who is a MarkTech Pro Max supporter over there. But that's about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will let me know what you would like to see me cover in the future videos. And of course, I will be streaming about half an hour before the Monday event, it's Glowtime iPhone 16 Apple event. So please join me live right then and there. And then in the following days, as we analyze everything that was introduced, everything that wasn't introduced, and of course, how we all feel about it. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'll see you guys next time. This is MarkTech tuning out.